The 3D effect bevel and extrude allows me to create a real dimensional object. It takes the path of my object and it extrudes it or pushes it back to create dimension. Let me show you how bevel and extrude works. I'll just select my square here and come up to the Effect menu, find 3D, Extrude and Bevel. And in my dialog box I'll go ahead and preview it and show all options. The top of my dialog box allows me to rotate my object in 3D space, whether by inputting specific degrees of rotation, selecting from a preset list here, or simply clicking and dragging on this cube which represents my object on the stage. But what gives my object dimension is the extrude depth, which is right down here. If it's set to 0, I simply have a two-dimensional object. As I boost this up, you see I now have a dimensional object. Right now my object is capped. In other words, it has a solid appearance. I can also select no cap and create a hollow looking object. I'm going to go ahead and reapply the cap for a solid appearance and take the extrude depth down a little bit. I'm going to come down here to set my bevel options. I have quite a few choices, from something very classic to much more complex bevels. I'll go ahead and set it to something sort of complex. And down here I can set the height of my bevel. Now notice that even as I increase its height, the shape on my stage is not getting any larger. In other words, it is beveling in to the object. However, this other option here allows me to extend the bevel out from my object. You can see it's grown quite a bit. I'm going to come back here and just extend it in. And maybe take down the bevel just a little bit. There we go. Now when working with a 3D object, the way you can get some really dramatic effects is to edit the lighting. And down here I have quite a few ways to edit that lighting. I have several surface options that I can play with. Right now it's set at plastic, which gives me this rather intense highlight along the edge of the bevel. I can diffuse it a little or make it a little bit softer. I can also apply no shading, which will flatten out the appearance of my object, or I can work in a wireframe mode. I'm going to go ahead and put back that plastic shading, and down here you'll see that I'm able to edit the direction of my light. Every time you have a 3D object, at least one light is already set for you, and you can see here as I click and drag it around how it's affecting the light on my object on the stage. I can send the light to the back right here. I'll bring it forward again. I can also add another light. There we go. Now, since it's a little too light, it's blowing out my object. Notice that on the right side, I can come and play with things like the intensity of the light, or how large the highlight is, taking it down, just a little too much there, and a few other things. I can also determine the shading color of my light. Black is standard, but if I am working in a darker environment, or want to do something a little bit more dramatic, I can set a custom light. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and, since I'm satisfied with the settings, apply them by saying OK. And while I've applied this to what was an extremely simple shape, just a square here, I'll show you that on this much more complex shape, my weather vane, I can apply the same effect without any problems. Using extrude and bevel is really effective on type in creating some dramatic title treatments. So just to show you quickly what that looks like, I'll go ahead and preview it. Let's go ahead and give it a little angle and maybe apply another light here. I'll just go ahead and say OK. When working with type, it is best if you use a more simple typeface. Using something that's extremely decorative or perhaps a script font can lead to some difficulties in the extrusion process. So there you have the 3D effect, bevel and extrude.